Today's video, I added this F9 Pro screen to the front of my Model Y Juniper. So one of my biggest knocks, always going back on Tesla for now the 7-8 years I've owned one, is the fact that they don't have any kind of CarPlay, or in my case, Android Auto. I use Android Auto all the time. My personal use, my businesses, the company I work for, my family, we all use Samsung phones. Often I'm using my phone in my car and I need my directions still, and my Android Auto using Google Maps is still significantly more accurate than even my Model Y or my Cybertruck, which does have premium connectivity. In fact, there was even a recent update on the Lucid where even it has CarPlay and Android Auto now. That's just one of the many solutions that this F9 screen supplies, is that Android Auto and a whole bunch of other things. So this came all packaged really well as usual, but in a really small box. It was basically big enough for the screen and some of these wires. There's a little fish tape, all the different wires, the screen, then a little toolkit. To pull this off, you are going to have to disassemble quite a few different panels on the car, and for most of it, you're going to use this little thing here. Now, eventually, we're going to get to where there's some little panels down below here on the passenger side. On my model, the Juniper, the Refresh, there are not screws down below, so I can remove all of them with this little tool. Now, this screen will work on other models of Tesla, including the Legacy Model Y, but you are going to have some screws you have to remove down here in the passenger and on the driver's side. I'll kind of talk it through as I see it. Once you have that off, you have to pull this whole little door rail off all the way back to there. Now there's a little rivet here up top. There's actually two little silver magnets here and here. These are actually what are largely holding this up into place. So once I pry it down a little bit more, I noticed there's a little speaker here, and I used needle nose pliers to separate that cord. Wasn't even sure if I needed to do this. Next, once I have all this open into here, I'm going to find this little mess of little wire ties and harnesses. There's a different few of these we'll plug in. It's all really simple, but I'll walk you through it step by step, or else it kind of looks overwhelming. Okay, so to zoom down in here, you'll notice first, there's this plug right here. If you notice, nothing is plugged into it, and that's fine. It's available for something to be plugged into. So you're going to locate the harness with the largest little end on it. That's an obvious T, and plug the male end down that female end below. And they're going to push it in to hear a definite click. Then you know you're good. Now that's going to be what communicates actually the brains and the thinking part of the car. But right here is where you're actually going to get your power from. So we're going to disconnect this. Again, I'm using some needle nose. When I pull this apart, I'm going to then find the little T here that looks like it goes into there. One end goes into that, of course, and the other end of that goes back in to the end that you just unplugged from the car itself, to be able to pass power through this, but also then sending the power to your F9 screen. So really now you're done. You are going to have a few extra wires here, including this little blue one here. Now this is for either other models, other parts of the country that we're not using in any part of our 26 Juniper install. You also have this little thing here, which is just a fuse. And as I pop this open, you can see inside here, it's actually one of those common auto fuse that's going to help protect your car's equipment. Now, basically, we have to get this over to the other side of the car. So in order to do that, use this same little orange pry tool and popped a bunch of clips off this little center console dash cover, which is all just like felt, kind of a suede material. Once you pop that out, I fished through the wire with a little fish tape. At least I began to. But before I go ahead and start fishing this through the system, I am actually putting the little front camera as part of the little setup for mine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that little camera wire first, because I'll want to fish these in through together. So they sell this model with and without a little front camera. So of course I got the one with the camera. I'll now jump into that part of it, installing it, which is going to be taking apart the little front area. So this actually comes apart easier than you would think. This little top section, again, you saw I used that little orange pry bar tool. It just pops out little rivets all across the front. I'm going to use a 10mm socket wrench to pull out 4 different bolts. There's 2 down here in the little base bottom of this front, and there's 2 up here on the front in each corner. Once these pull out, that whole little shell removes. So there is one, and I feel like one only particular way that this has to go. So I went ahead and pulled my fish wire out to show you. Now I'm on the very front of this front on the passenger side. If you notice here, we're looking for a little tiny triangle. Now this triangle right here is the only place you can feed this fish tape through and then pull it out the other side. So I just pulled it out for you can see it. Now I'm going to go ahead and fish this back through. Again, I'm on the very front of the trunk on the passenger side, and I fished this through, and I'm able to pull it out down here on the bottom, which of course, then I take my wire to it and then pulled it back through slowly. This does fit, and it's like I said, the only way it actually goes through. So once I have it on the inside, I kind of tuck it underneath that frame, pull all my slack tight. Okay, so here we are again here on the inside of the passenger side of the car. So you can see when I look through here with the door open, I can see a little bit of light. So that's where I'm going to try to fish this through. So I have like a stiff but yet flexible fish tape that worked well for me. I kind of fished it through. Once I pulled it through here on the front side, I taped that wire to it again and then slowly pulled it back through. This part was not a problem. Once I had it through, I untaped it all. Now that I have this little camera wire pulled from the front, now I have to find a way to get it over into here. But the door is going to shut really tight here, so you can't just string it through here. However, there is a little access point. There's a little hole down here that has like a little rubber grommet filling it. That's where we're going to access it. So I'll show you this the best I can because it gets kind of dark down in here, but as you zoom up close, you'll see that little hole there. It just has this little rubber cover in it. When I pull this little rubber cover out, it's just a hole. So then I just fed this little camera wire down in through that void, and I was able to grab the other end of it down that dash that I pulled out earlier. Now that I have both the power wire and the control wire fished through, I'm going to attach them to the other end of this little fish tape that we pulled through earlier and see if I can pull them up into this little section here and then across the front of the top of the dash. So that's exactly what I did. I went ahead and taped this little camera wire really good to this fish tape and then went ahead and pulled it through. This first part actually came through really easy. So once I had this through, I of course then untaped it. Then I ended up refishing this fish tape back through down to the inside. Then I went ahead and taped on the actual camera part of the wire and went ahead and pulled this through. Now this one was just a little bit trickier, so I ended up using that same little pry tool to create a little more space to help pull this through. And once I had it through, I went ahead and pulled all the slack out. Then it was a matter of just making these two connections. Of course, this black one here is the camera wire. Then it's hard to show here on the camera, but these yellow ones just plug together in a very specific way. And then you can see we do have power. Okay, so now to put this back on. So first I did is I pulled all this little slack out, so it was extra, and I tucked the connections down into what looked like a little more of an open spot. Okay, right here I'm pointing out the middle of this little top panel. It has a large stud, so it's easiest to put that in first, then all the other clips just knock into place with a little bit of force. Again, just make sure your wires aren't going to be caught in any of those clips. Once that all knocked together, looks really good and sits totally flush yet again. And now the worst is over, so it's just putting all this dash back up into place. Now I do have a bunch of this extra junk left over, but that's okay because it looks like there's going to be plenty of room back into this dash a little bit. And there was. So first thing I did is push this little speaker wire back together. Then again, this little bottom dash just snaps back up into place really nicely using magnets. I do think it was important to take your time to get those wires tucked back in nice so they're not pinched. Then it's a matter of putting that little weather strip back on, putting this little extra piece on the edge, including this little rivet, and then this little end piece. And after that, then you can put this little weather stripping back all the way around. And of course, I got this little piece that goes on the Velcro of my card. That little protection, that carbon fiber piece. So I'll be the first one to admit, I wasn't planning on doing this, and this is not the right way to do it, but I initially just kind of poked this little camera through the front here, and I was going to fasten it down using that little tape and bracket, but I actually just kind of wedged it in between two of these little plastic prongs. You can kind of see it holds there. So the wire is still attached to it, so it's not going to like fall out. So I'll probably just leave it there for a little bit and see how long it lasts. I'll update you in the future how that works when I give you a full recap and a few review to give you about a few weeks to a few months down the road. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to get that part. So as I'm putting this back in, I'll talk to you about some of the challenges I had, and I'll kind of give you an idea how long this took me and how long it should take somebody else following the instructions I just gave. So I'll go over all the settings here in just a minute, and then I'll finish with a big review. But here again, as you saw me as I'm putting this frunk all back together. So this took me, all said and done, probably about 2.5 to maybe 3 hours. Now, all that being said is I'm figuring it out as I go along. Knowing what I know now, I could probably do this whole thing in an hour. And even somebody that was inexperienced, it would probably take you about 1.5 hours to 2. Here's the first look with it powered on. It shows it's like charging. It shows you the odometer, the time, the range, and the battery percentage, which of course matches the on-screen percentage. Now they've unplugged the charger from it. You can see it has a little door, which matches when you open the door on the actual car. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and put it into gear, and then you can see this little camera come up as I drive forward. And if you notice, I didn't do anything to activate that. The camera's going to come on anytime you put it into gear. Now, yes, of course, you can just click this right here, and that brings up your screen. And obviously, that's just as good, if not better. But still, without having to press this, you just have this screen here in motion. It's also kind of cool that that front camera stays on even when you're in reverse. All right, so now let me show you how to connect the Bluetooth. So I'm going to connect that little Android there. You're going to see Bluetooth Car Kit 990. That's what you're going to look for. So here's actually a view of my phone. So you're going to scroll all the way down to the many, many Bluetooth options I have, both present and past. All the way to the bottom, you're going to find that Car Kit 9D90. Then you're going to connect. It's going to ask you to pair. And then once you click OK and continue, it just pops up. And it's literally that simple. And what you're looking at now is a projection of my phone, full Android Auto. All right, so let me give you some pluses and minuses of this, and I'll start with the minuses here. So the same thing with this little F9 screen that was with my C9 screen I put in the Cybertruck is I can't make changes to anywhere on the screen while I'm driving down the road. I can't back out of maps. I can't even adjust volume. I can't change things. So I kind of wish I could, but I get for the safety reasons why it won't let you. But to me, that's a downside. The next downside, it's volume. Even at its max volume, which is number 25 on here, it's not very loud. It's plenty loud to get directions if you're using like your Android Auto, which is the primary reason I have this. But if I'm also listening to like messages, like voice messages, voicemails, things like that, it's not very loud. It's actually kind of hard to hear at some points. even with that volume maxed out. Now that being said, you can still connect your phone to the actual Bluetooth of the car, and then you can hear your volume as loud as you want, again, just through the car screen. While that is a downside, it is mitigatable. Now let me give you a couple positives. So if you're new to electric vehicles, or especially new to this particular setup where you have just one screen in the middle, you know it can be a little bit hard to get used to and a little bit distracting at times that no display is right in front of you when you click forward. Well, this kind of solves that. Not only can you see a map right in front of your face, but also you see things like speed limits, turn signals. So all those things are a little bit helpful, and it might help you transition to this little futuristic spaceship kind of car we have here. I mentioned the Android Auto, huge plus to me. That's the reason I got it, and that alone makes this worth all the money. And another upside, which I'll show you here, is there are a bunch of other cool little features you can use. Again, you have to be in park, but let me show you what some of those are. So this first thing here isn't really a feature. I just want to show you when you open the door and get in, you have this really cool animation that comes across that screen. So the first thing I noticed is you actually see the turn signal on this little front screen in addition to your main screen. Now let me walk you through some of the settings. Of course, when you swipe down, that brings up the menu. So of course, you can change volume from this screen. You can also change things like Fahrenheit, Celsius, and also like time code. But then here's the cool thing. You can actually change the color of your vehicle. So you see here, I turned it red to match my car. And then, of course, now the car is red. Next, you know, at the very top of the screen, there's 3 different shapes. These are actually your car with a corresponding door that it could potentially pop open on each of these. Passenger, then, of course, the 2 rear. So if you notice here, I'll press the passenger one, and it just slightly pops this door open. Now, where that could be helpful is if you're trying to let someone in your car. You're trying to give somebody a little bit of boost so they don't have to pull that handle. Maybe if their hands are full. I don't know, maybe if you're using your car for Uber or Lyft, something like that. You just want to pop it open. Maybe kind of like a party trick, but you better know I'm going to be using that. You also have a button here that's basically a shortcut to open and shut your mirrors. You press it once, they close. Obviously, press it again, it opens back up. And then you have a little button here where you can actually move the passenger seat forward or backward. I don't know how practical this is, but you definitely know I'm going to be doing this. And then there's a couple different themes, like this is a little drive theme I'm on, and it does a couple cool things, like if you'll notice it keeps track of speedometer, but actually horsepower, which, you know, could be useful. And in addition to giving you a speedometer display, it also gives you a speed limit display as you're driving down the road. Another cool trick, if you're willing to like finagle away and work this around a little bit, is since your phone is connected to this little screen and it has its own little volume, you can actually listen through Bluetooth to things you would normally load on your screen, whether that's YouTube Music, Spotify, Amazon Music, anything like that. You can listen to it and hear it out of this display, while actually potentially other people in the car could be listening to something else. Now, you're going to be mixing volumes and whatnot, but it actually is an option that you could use someday. Okay, so here's my quick review. So I've only been using this about a day, so it's hard to really let you know how well this is going to hold up. That being said, I do have a very similar screen. I think we called it a C9 screen that went in my Cybertruck. I've been using that now for a good 7, 8, 9 months. If you scroll back through my video, you'll see I did a complete video on that. I have had 0 problems with that, and I mean 0. It's been perfect. No errors, no glitches, nothing like that. Now, that being said, this one has that front camera added in that my Cybertruck one does not. If you're on the fence, if you're thinking like, hey, this is something I might be interested in, but I just don't know if I want to pull the trigger yet, subscribe to the channel. Like everything I put in this car, if you give me a few weeks to a few months, I'll give a full review of what it's like after I've battle tested it a little bit. I've always said the Model Y, and especially this Juniper, is the best car for the money on the road. It has everything you ever need, but this does add a couple really cool little features. And for me, the total game changer is Android Auto. Now, if you're an Apple person, it also has that CarPlay. I'll, of course, put the link to this little F9 screen down in the description below. And I'll give you a little discount code, which is the name of my channel, Charisma. If you use that code, it'll give you a real significant discount off anything on the site. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.